Rightio, I think we're all good to go. Welcome everybody. This is our first live streamed briefing. Before we get started, I'd just like to put an apology in for Kelly. He is away today, so I am taking the chair. And BB will be late. She's working at a COVID testing station, which is very busy at the moment. So we'll speak to her when we see her. We've got a whole range of topics today. We've got quarter of an hour on each. First up, we've got Brendan Winder and Courtney Reid, Residential Red Zone. So are you there, Brendan? Courtney?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon all.
You're just going to tell us what you've been doing and answer a couple of questions maybe?
Sure. Do you want me to kick off now, Joe?
Yeah, kick off.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board. The maintenance regime in the residential red zone carries on as normal. It's been a tricky couple of months, as you'll all appreciate, with the wet weather and the warm weather. So the spring flush turned into the summer flush. It might end up turning into the autumn flush as well too. So there's a downside to that. The grass grows frantically and it makes it tricky to maintain. So we've had a couple of challenges out there. We've also had a couple of staff not be available for their full productivity, given there's been some challenges around the COVID mandate as well too. So we've been down a couple of staff there. There's also a few challenges at the moment around the supply chain. So any gear that does get beaten up by the work that we do in the red zone, it's difficult to get parts for. And then it's a wee bit tricky to get people in to fix it too, because there's people away with, various things, and more it's related to COVID. So definitely some challenges. But in saying that, the majority of the feedback we've been getting from people on the residential red zone has been positive. People understand it's a 4-week mowing cycle, and if we tracked our feedback against our areas, almost inevitably week 3 and week 4 is when we see the increase in feedback. In week 1 and week 2, generally people are very happy. We try and do an extra mow over the summer period. It doesn't always work out, but generally it sticks to a 4-week pattern, and we've stuck to that this year as well. Had great success in removing many of the fences around the residential red zone. It's something near 15 kilometres of fencing has come out completely, and about another 30 kilometres of other fencing wire that was just on the fences but is no longer required to come out too. So that's been taken away. We've tried to find alternative uses for those posts and that wire. The posts have been easy enough. The wire is tricky because it comes off a fence and it's not in great condition when it comes off. So doing our best to use the circular economy there, but it hasn't always worked out as well as we'd hoped. Many trees have been trimmed, lots have been assessed. We've done quite a bit of work around the shrubs. Pest control also, we're starting to see a lot of anecdotally increased use around the residential red zone. Lots of people cycling, kids on the paths, e-bikes, prams, etc. A lot of cycling groups through there as well. We're seeing a lot of interest around the 3 bridges, which Courtney will tell us a wee bit more about in a minute, with the openings coming up. And the landing is very close in Dellington as well to being open too. So seeing lots of great activity there. We're coming into autumn, so it's the planting season. We've got lots of trees to plant. We've got a commitment through our policy to replace 2 trees with every one we pull out. We'll probably beat that ratio by about 100 times. So we're way ahead of that. I know there's a bit of a concern around the city around canopy cover, but I can rest assured that the residential red zone's doing its bit to make sure that we increase canopy cover across the city at a high rate. So we'll be doing our bit. Out towards Brooklands, there's been lots of good progress made out there with the community. I know the community development advisor out there has been flat out, and Courtney's spent a bit of time with her also. There's some challenges out there around boy races and other activity, but we've changed some fences and access around to improve that. And that's not a problem we can necessarily solve, but we can help out with it. And there's a fair bit of work going on down in South Shore, South New Brighton too, which I think will be addressed a little bit later on. One little niggly issue that we'll get to, but other than that, the estuary edge protection project is progressing well. There's a couple of opportunities here to explore, but we've got the money and the team in place. now pulling together the information and the technical reports, and we'll follow the correct sequence and get that moving. So Courtney, do you want to give the team an update on the 3 bridges and the landing, just as a bit of an overview for timing around those opening ceremonies?
Yep. So we've got the Avondale Bridge opening this Friday, which is really exciting. And as much as we'd like to have a huge community opening, at this time it's not quite what we're wanting to do, but as long as we've got a few key stakeholders of our community there, then that would be great. And then we've got the Darlington Landing opening next Saturday the 12th of March, and then Midway at this stage is looking like it's going to be opening mid to late March, and then Snell's Bridge open at this stage around April.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thanks.
Are there any questions to put to the Red Zone team on the board? Celeste?
I think you must be doing a good job.
There's never any lack of feedback, that's for sure. But yeah, we feel like we are. There's it's a complex environment. We try and do our best out there. The mowing this year has been tricky, and I know there have been some people disappointed with what they've seen. But given the volume of mowing and the rate at which the grass is growing, we've done our absolute best. So we make sure we're really responsive. And when we do get feedback that a particular area might be looking untidy, we've got a team that'll go in and take care of that. We are down on people, and we do plan for this. It's not like it comes around as a surprise each year, but we're really conscious of the amenity value people seeing it. So, we'll continue to work out on that. And if people spot areas that are looking untidy, please let us know. If our staff can't respond to it, we have got contractors available occasionally too. So we deploy them pretty quickly as well.
Well, thanks, Brendan. I can think of a couple of places I can send into you.
Good.
Celeste, you had a question?
Brendan, I wondered if you could give us a bit more of an update on what's happening in the red zone, that sort of bits of the red zone that are outside the bit that's part of, the regeneration strategy. Is there any update on those areas?
So Port Hills, Brooklands, South Shore, South Brighton?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so the River Corridor is a regeneration plan, as you know. In Brooklands, there's a community development advisor up there who's taken the lead on the planning for that area. So there's some pretty complicated issues in Brooklands that most people are aware of. There's some ongoing flooding issues that may or may not be related to the earthquakes. There's different schools of thought there. There's some unsavoury or antisocial behaviour, which is difficult to manage from a land management point of view, but we do our best around access and egress and reducing the opportunities for that sort of behaviour to take place. The amenity value out there has significantly improved, so we've done quite a lot on the fences and the trees to make it look better. People look after areas better when it looks better to start with. So, our gradual improvement process has meant that the antisocial behaviour reports that we get are slowly reducing. So it's been really encouraging. And there's still a long way to go in Brooklands, and we've had a couple of conversations with people around what is the regeneration plan out there, and that's not a question we can answer from a land management point of view. We have a role to play in it for sure, but from a parks unit point of view, we feel like we're doing our job, and there's a wider council commitment to the area that we'll be a part of. So we'll do our bit, and other council units will do their bit. But nailing it down to who's going to lead that and where the money's going to come from and those sort of questions is outside the scope of the brief that I've got. But we feel like we're making a really fit and progress in Brooklands. South Shore, South Brighton, another really interesting part of the red zone. There's quite a bit of money getting spent, upwards of 10 million on the estuary edge protection program and the project, and that will has kicked off already, and a lot of those technical reports are starting to get pulled together, and the actual project work, the spades in the ground's coming up, and it was in the newsletter that was widely distributed recently, so people will be able to follow the timeline there. There's been lots of communications done. Katie McRae and her team have done lots of good work on some pretty tough timelines to get the information out to the community. That hasn't always been as easy as we'd liked because of recent changes. and we've got a couple of people in the community who are directly affected. I think we'll sort of discuss it maybe later on. So we're doing our best to make sure that they aren't adversely affected either. That area out there, given it's so close to the estuary, it's hard to make that look like a golf course, and I don't think anyone ever wants to do that. But there's some tricks in improving that. There's also a little bit of antisocial behaviour at the New Brighton end as well, which we're trying to deal with. In the Port Hills, so it's a different beast really, the Port Hills. Red zone for different reasons, of course. Red zone for life risk there, and scattered across about 40 or 50 different sites, depending on how you count the numbers. The risk out there was well quantified 10 years ago, and the decisions were made around zoning and the offers made to the homeowners, and most of them took it and some of them didn't, and away they went. Since then, that risk hasn't been regularly quantified, and it hasn't been done consistently, and that's not anyone's fault. It's just a fact that there's a lot of properties out there, and there's some really complex and in some cases overlapping life risk issues that need to be technically assessed. So in order to make decisions out there on that land, quite a big piece of work needs to get done on the life risk, and the appetite to do that is there, but we need to find the money and the resources and the time and prioritise it against other efforts as well. Here's a broader question.
We need to get moving on.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Sorry. I have one message came in from Hayley about the red zone security. If we can get that answered afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah, so we'll get the answers off you later and post that to our Facebook page. Thanks a lot, you two. And we're on to road landscapes with Neville. Neville Tucker here.
G'day. You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you, Neville.
I don't want you to see me. I'm in the office at the moment, so I'm keeping a very low profile. I've got people by
Welcome along.
It's a bit
so
busy.
Give us an update on what you've been up to, please.
Well, pretty much it's business as usual for us. It's been a very, very challenging growing season. So obviously we've just been solely focused over the last several months on weed growth, lawn mowing, our general gardening, doing a little bit of planning for our renovation programs for boom, which is turf boom, of course, and our gardens. But of late, it's been a sole focus on the challenging growing year we're faced with. So pretty much that's it from us. Obviously, we're working on, there's a lot of things in the background, of course, with Kiwirau issues, NZTA issues, new subdivisions, our cycleways, lots and lots of things, obviously citywide, the challenges for us, but slowly working through them to see where they fit within the transport division with the contract, and whether they a GIS properly. So basically that's the mapping systems and all that type of carry on. So there's a bit of that going on in the background. But as I said, this year is challenging enough just to keep on top of the growth, let alone at the moment worrying about anything else. So we're hoping Mother Nature's going to be a bit kinder to us in the next, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, the next month, so that we can start getting on to some of our other programs that we'd really like to get into. But as I say, at the moment, it's solely focused on maintenance. And that's
what's your
citywide,
program at the moment? Are you doing like monthly rotation or?
The mowing regimes haven't really changed. We stick to them pretty firmly. So our mowing residential berms on request, of course, are done up to, depending on the seasonal growth, but this year will probably be between 8 and 10 times. It's only meant to keep them in check. What we call our amenity mowing is still pretty static, so it sits on between around 17 to 20, depending on seasonal growth. So that hasn't really changed a lot. Our gardening pretty much never changes, that's monthly. Our thermal program is the same, that's monthly. Our spraying weeds is unchanged, that's 5 times per year. And then we assess month by month just to see, how we're coping pretty much. But all those maintenance regimes haven't really changed and don't change a lot. It's just a matter of, we've got response teams, of course, that will help us in the background if we're struggling a bit from time to time on some of the things we're doing. But yeah, generally that's pretty much it in a nutshell for the maintenance. Hasn't really changed at all.
Thanks, Neville. Linda has a question for you.
You mentioned a word that really gets me excited, spraying.
Yeah.
Where you've got seal going up to concrete curb,
Yeah.
weeds grow in there and they grow handsomely. They don't need a lot of water.
No,
And they
they
grow in
certainly don't.
bushes, and then they crack the seal.
Right.
Then we've got potholes to fix in our footpaths. And I'd really like to see something done with the spraying regime. An area that you could look at is between Martians Road and Tamara Park on the new roading along there and through those two new suburbs. I'm seeing it in other areas around a little bit in Avondale, certainly along Q2 Drive. I'm seeing weeds growing there where they shouldn't be, and they're not being captured by lawn mowing, so they fall through the cracks, I guess, with you guys. So please,
Yeah.
that'd be lovely.
Yeah, I can. I know we keep on harping on about the sending tickets through, but if you fancy, if you can send through Cindy just some areas where I can evaluate, because what like Q2 Drive parts that'll be NZTA, of course. But if you can, yeah, send us a couple just highlighting the streets you've just mentioned, and I'll definitely pop out and have a look.
Okay, I'm happy to send it through Cindy because it'll get done.
Yep,
Forget
no,
this
that's
map
fine.
solve send, forget it. Doesn't
Okay,
work.
no, that's okay. We'll you know, regardless of that, no, that's all right. Regardless of that, that's what it's there for. But yeah, if you fancy, just get Cindy to highlight 2 or 3 of those things for us, and get her to bang them through. Cindy and I touch base from time to time, and that's no drama. I can, when I'm out, I'll just have a quick squeeze around, just get my head around what areas they will fall under, so we can see who's meant to be maintaining them, and you know whether maintenance regimes are handling that situation, or whether they need to be tweaked, or I need to talk to someone.
Poor Cindy.
Yes, that's cool. You just send it through, and we'll deal to it. We'll try to deal to it.
Any other questions from the board? Celeste?
I'm not sure if this is directed at the right person, but I got asked this question a wee while ago, and I was asked whether there's a historic register for parks. So whether some parks are on a different maintenance regime. I'm thinking of Jack Hinton and some of the conversations that happened around that. And I was asked if there was a special register for parks that had historic value.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I can't. The parks. I'm in transport, so parks is under Bridie. Maybe something to direct to her. I'm not 100% sure. Sorry on that one.
Okay, and Phil?
Thank you, guys. Hey, with Linda talking about all these weeds, which is good. Do you, with their policy that the council brought in last year, do you go along and water these weeds with hot water, or are you using glyphosate on them to make sure they're dead and they don't come back?
We use 2 regimes. As I said before, we do thermal and chemical. So some areas, depends on where the rounds are set up, and they do change from time to time depending upon you know how bad the weeds are getting, what type of weeds and all that sort of carry on. But we use glyphosate, obviously. Try to minimise its use, of course, as much as possible. But there's both pretty much. Just depends on the areas, and some things like deep dish channels and all those type of things are more difficult to control. So we'll quite often have different maintenance regimes around them. But yeah, we use both.
Oh, that's good. No, that's great. More the merrier. Well, look at it.
I can't comment on that, of course.
You can't use it around kids' school playgrounds and all that sort of thing. But there are some places, like I'm thinking, I know it's a transit road, but down the side of QE2 Drive, like Linda was saying, surely places like that, you're allowed to use it. I don't know where you are allowed to use it. Yeah,
we use it where we see it most practical. There are some issues for us, of course. Obviously we don't do NZTA stuff that's controlled by that authority, but no, we do that. If we feel, it comes to me, if we feel that we do have to change a regime for the chemical control, so to speak, we will do that.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Not a problem at all.
Sorry, did you have another question, Linda?
Yes, actually still on spraying. Seeing you're looking at using steam, which I really agree with that. in the springtime when the weeds aren't too big. I think that works really well. But I think anywhere near waterways, can't use the other stuff. We don't need that in there. Would that be right?
So you're breaking up a little bit there, sorry. So I lost half of that.
Oh, am I breaking up? Right, okay.
Yes, yeah, I didn't get a lot of that, sorry.
Yeah, steam and with spring growth, new weeds coming up. That would work. I think I've lost him.
Are you still there, Neville?
We gone.
I think we have lost Neville.
Yeah.
We scared
Is
him
he-
off.
Is
I
he
mean,
still
I think-
online, Cindy?
He's just popped back in. Neville, are you still online?
yeah, no, I've just come back. There was a bit of a down there for some reason. Good old modern technology, but yeah, I'm back.
Okay. Did you want to repeat that, Linda?
Okay, I'll have another go. Steam would work on those weeds that I mentioned before that are growing up between new seal and new curbing. In the springtime, when they're smaller, would that be right?
Yes.
So if that was part of your process, you knock those over before they become a problem. You have to use the big bad glyphosate.
Yeah, I think a small weed's easily controlled with steam or glyphosate. Again, it
I think he's allergic to me.
depends where it is and.
You broke. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cutting out, Neville. Are you there,
Who's
Neville?
meant to be looking after and what regime it's fitting. That's correct. The smaller the weed we can get to, the better. It knocks the hell out of them. It's not so.
Yep. Good.
Okay, I think we've lost him again, have we?
I think we have to go with hand signals.
Oh, well. Shall we move on to the next one, Chris?
Oh,
Oh, Neville's back.
I'm coming to go. It's a typical Monday, I'm afraid. It's coming and going.
You would have got a list of all the questions sent through from quite a few of the community members, and there was actually quite a bit of talk about the weeds and everything on the roadside gardens, especially like roundabouts and some of the berms. That's your responsibility, is it?
We're talking about, yeah, but well, basically yes. If it's within, if it's within, transport and legal corridor, so to speak, yes. But
Okay.
Again, it just depends where and all this sort of drama. But yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And also after we've had all the flooding along the roads next to the river, New Brighton Road and Pages Road, there's a lot of reeds coming through. What do you do about those?
Reeds on normally the reeds sit within the sort of like wet margins or what we call riverbank reserves, which we don't normally do. We have had a few of the species of different what they call oi down on the causeway, which seems to be creeping a wee bit, and we spray them as best we can if they're encroaching onto hard surface or getting into within the cracks of hard surface, because they can do some damage. But for some of the other areas, I think what I'm getting from what you're trying to explain is it sound more like riverbank reserves or wet margin areas, which we don't normally get involved with in one of the three waters or parks.
It's the flooding that's been in Pages Road, especially where the gutters and footpaths have great big lines of reeds down them there, so they probably need to be sent in as a report. Yeah,
if you, I didn't quite get all that, but yeah, if you've got any concerns like that, something Brendan and I can talk about to see where that sits and who can deal with those. Definitely, if there's those sort of infestations getting on, they're pretty hardy old beasts, the reeds, and then probably as soon as they start popping up, we need to do something about it. So again, if you can whack that through Cindy maybe for me, and I have a bit of a scoot around later on this week when I get out of the office and get out and get some fresh air.
You can see there's going to cause a bit of issue with breaking through and breaking up the tar. So we'll put that through.
Yeah, cool.
Any other questions before Neville leaves?
I think I've picked on them enough, thank you.
That's good as going. Yeah, talk to me anytime you fancy.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Neville.
Good as gold.
We'll,
Take
yeah, thank you.
Take care, everyone. See you later.
Okay, well, moving on to Robbie Hewson, Head Ranger for Coastal and Plains. You there, Robbie?
Yep. Hi team. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, we can hear you.
I'll see if I can sort this video out. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
I
there
can see
you
myself.
are.
Yeah. Hi, how's it going?
You're good.
Cool. Look, I'll just give you a really quick run through of my area. But so my name's Robbie Hewson. Kia ora, everyone. I am the head ranger for the Coastal and Plains Regional Park team for the council. So regional parks in the coastal area, or just in general, are generally the more natural, wilder spaces of our city. So they generally have high biodiversity value or high recreation aesthetics and values. So in the coastal area, we're talking your Travis wetlands, all of the coastline, of course, right from the Waimakariri mouth through to Godley Head, the Brooklands Lagoon, Spencer Park, places like that. So and there's little, obviously we cover Bottle Lake as well, which is a really high valued area in the coastal ward for recreation. But like everyone, we've had a super busy season. The growth has kept us busy for sure. The guys have been out. I should say that we've got a team of 12 rangers. So we're a very, very practical operational team with people out there on the ground doing it. And we also work with community and volunteer groups, contractors as well. But yeah, like everyone, been super busy, just keeping on top of the growth, and so in particular, access to those areas that I was talking about. A lot of track cutting work and mowing going on this season. We do a lot of natural area work, so keeping on top of maintenance of our plantings. In particular, stuff that you guys will be interested in is along the coastline. So the last planting season, we put in about 20,000 coastal stabilisation plants. And so there's been sort of maintenance aspects involved in those. Looking ahead, the guys are already prepping for another busy planting season next winter. We have been doing a lot of work out at Spencer Park recently, and in particular around the lagoon. It's probably an underappreciated gem of the city, but Brooklands Lagoon has really high biodiversity value, and so one of our goals out there is to put some work in to improve the way people use the place. Mostly manage, so our job as rangers is managing the recreation and how people interact with those natural spaces, I suppose. So making sure that these places we provide are actually sustainable for people to be able to use, and they're not having an impact on the natural values of the site. So we've got some track improvements planned, some track resurfacing, and with the view of trying to allow some natural recovery to happen. So we've been putting some work into a restoration plan for the area. We've got little bits of planting coming up for the season. What else have we got? We've got some work. We look after Travis wetland. You guys will be pretty familiar with Travis, but a lot of our focus there is working with the Travis Wetland Trust, and our rangers carry out a pretty solid pest animal control program and pest plant control program. Travis is one of our incredible wetland sites, of course. Look, that's probably as much as I can describe about our area. We cover everything from day-to-day rubbish runs and keeping the beaches clean and tidy through to asset maintenance and renewal work. Oh, actually, you should talk about that. Coming up, we've got some hard surface renewal work coming up on the coast at Taylor's Mistake and South New Brighton car park. So those are scheduled for a reseal and a redo coming up in April. Other than that, I'll probably hook into questions.
Yeah, sorry, Robbie, the South New Brighton car park, is that the one by the jetty?
No, sorry, the South New Brighton Surf Club car park. So just on Marine Parade there, corner Bridge Street. Yeah, it's scheduled for it's pretty munted, so it's scheduled for a renewal.
Okay, with the car park by the jetty, do you look after that area, or is that under parks?
I think that's a community park area.
Park? Okay, thank you. Okay, any questions?
Just had one.
Linda? Yes.
The work that you're doing on Brooklands Lagoon, it's really great. It's quite a low area, isn't it? And the area in Spencer Park is quite low as well. Is there anything that can be done in the form of protecting the built-up area?
Oh, you're talking about the picnic grounds itself. Yeah, it's been a problem out at Spencer Park for as long as I can remember, really. But yeah, this year was obviously no different. We had a heap of flooding with the heavy rainfall event. In short, we have done some fairly low-key repairs of the grounds to try and sort of channel the water when we get those. The main issue is when we get those really heavy rainfalls that it floods. It's partly contending with natural process as well, and it's possibly one of those questions that will be bundled in with the sea level rise conversations around how should we manage those sort of areas. Do we build them up? Do we roll with it? Do we take a more natural approach? I'm not sure. But at this stage, there's no major earthworks planned or anything like that in the picnic ground. It's just it is a bit of a hard one. I know it's frustrating, particularly this year. The gala was impacted.
Yes,
that they have out there.
This is directly related to the earthquakes, by the way. There wasn't a problem before.
Yeah. So I understand as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Did you have questions, Celeste?
No, I just wondered if any of the questions that were emailed through related to any of the speakers, whether we could run through some of those.
Yeah, I did have a look at the questions, Celeste. I don't think there were any directly for regional parks.
I'll just chuck in one then of my own. Do you feel like there's any particular issue that you've sort of noticed of late? For instance, motorbikes or, issues with dogs and wildlife. Is this sort of things that you think would be useful for people to know?
Yeah, for sure. So I think a pretty strong theme coming through with some of the groups we work with is around dogs and wildlife at the moment. Certainly, we're working trust on reviewing some of the signage that we've got in place and people's behaviour around those sensitive areas. So I think, yeah, that's certainly an area for concern in the community. Probably another one that our team would be really keen to make more prominent in the coastal community is actually around the importance of stabilisation and sand dune protection, and actually being aware of, I suppose, the incredible natural values of our coastline. So that's something that our guys plug away at with the groups we work with. And I think a job for us is to actually get amongst some of those residents associations and groups and actually kind of talk to them about what we do with our coastal protection program, where we clear sand fences, but we also do a whole lot of planting to stabilise and basically leave sand where it should be and try and have it where it's not. Yeah, does that help?
Thanks. Phil, you've got a question?
Yeah, Roger. Hey, Rob. Spencer Park Surf Club car park, is that your department?
Say again, sorry, mate. Spencer Surf Club.
Yeah. Is that the car park there? Is that your department?
Oh, the one directly outside the surf club is in the club's lease area. So it's part of, they developed it as part of their footprint. Oh,
okay. No, I've got a mate of mine, a son of a mate of mine, John Lerm. He's the one that looks after it out there. And so I'll just deal with him because it's part of his bit of dirt, is it, so to speak?
Yeah. If it's in their lease footprint, then it's their patch. Yeah, but I mean, we work pretty closely with when they've got sort of storage and stuff to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, I'll keep you in the loop like I always do.
Yeah, you do that, mate. That sounds good.
I'll just ask a couple of questions here, Robbie. The Travis wetlands, a lady contacted me the other day just about the long grass being a bit out of control, and she's saying that she gets cut ankles every time she goes walking. Is that on the track?
Shouldn't be on the track because most of Travis's boardwalked or formed pathway and unless she's talking about the overhang of not grass, but the native Carrick sector, which is found in the swamp, maybe growing along the edge of the pathway.
Yeah.
That could be the issue. It's known as
It
cutty
could be the
grass.
issue because it's quite a thicker grass, isn't it? It would do a bit more damage.
Yeah, the guys could be due to. I can check in with John, our ranger at Travis, and find out about that. I think I know exactly the section she'll be talking about.
And the other one that we get quite a few complaints about is the rubbish bins on the beach.
Oh, yeah.
And they've gone, and even up by the New Brighton Surf Club next to the ramp. Any chance of getting those back in place?
The ones that sit on the north ramp themselves, the big ones that were there, is that the ones you're talking about?
The south ramp and the north ramp have both gone now.
Yeah, Bridie may be the person to talk more to that one. I think it will be packaged as part of the smart bin upgrade program that's happened recently, and looking at more strategic locations of bins. Yeah, Bridie, anything you want to add on the ramps?
Anything that's sorry, hello, just butt in here. On the ramps, I'm not sure they're rubbish. So we only take bins out of community park assets. So if the ramp itself is sitting with regional parks, it's not part of our project to take those out. So would have to come back to you and check that one.
Yeah, the community park areas, Bridie, on the ramps.
They
themselves.
are okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they yes, in that case they would have come out as part of that bin rationalisation project.
There's a lot of people that quite happily pick up rubbish off the beach, as long as they can put it straight into a bin. And a lot of the bins have disappeared off the beach now. And also, when I was down there the other day, they had the surf life saving on, and there were people walking around with rubbish trying to look for somewhere to put it. And there's just nowhere apart from the park. And a lot of people don't know they're actually at the park. So they're walking around a bit lost.
There should be, so there's smart bins at each of the core beach access locations where there's a surf club, Joe. So right along the coast, so from all of the major access points like Waimari Beach, North Beach.
There's none at New Brighton.
At North New Brighton?
No, at New Brighton.
Yeah, there is in front of the playground access way. I think there's two smart bins there.
Not next to the surf club.
None at the surf club, but there's two at the actual hot pools complex area around that hub. So I mean, it's within 100 meters walking distance, I suppose.
You kind of need signs saying rubbish bin that way because they're so far away.
Right. It's certainly something I can work with the community parks guys on, and we can certainly have a look at it. But
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. Any other questions from the board?
This might be for Bridie. It was just going back to the question around a Jack Hinton Reserve, and if we have a historic park register, if they're on a slightly different schedule.
A historic park register. We have garden and heritage parks. So a lot of our parks are split up between they can be sports parks, cemeteries, regional parks like with Robbie there, community parks, or garden heritage parks. So garden and heritage parks usually hold some sort of historical status, but Jack Hinton doesn't. It is just a community park in that community park group of parks.
Linda?
It'd be a good idea if we had a register for both our wards on how our parks are classified, and then we know how to direct the question back. I know that the regional park covers Bottle Lake and South Brighton Reserve, Thompson Park, but as for those other classification ones, we wouldn't have a clue. So if we had even a map that's got a key down the side that says this is historic, this is a community, that would be easy enough, wouldn't it?
Is that something you can look at?
So sorry, just butting in here, Celeste. So by historic parks, what do you mean specifically?
I think the question arose that I guess the term historic park isn't very precise, but more parks that might have a memorial that have some significance for people, or anything with a bit of cultural and historic value. So the park itself might not be historic, but it might have some special meaning to the community or the wider community, and whether they have a kind of a sort of a different mowing schedule, for instance, than another park, or a higher level of maintenance.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand what you're saying. I know for regional parks, most of our guys who manage their individual areas will have reasonable records of those things. Where there's significant cultural overlays and things like that, those are kept on a different level. There's also sort of archaeological type layers where there's that level of detail involved. When it's on a more community significance level, I suppose in our area they'll generally be kept with the individual kind of site manager, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think you shouldn't have too many problems if there's something specific you wanted to get your hands on. Most people will have a record of that within their parks they look after.
Okay. That question was actually, I thought Bridie would be answering that one, because it's relating to the areas that are under your control. So it's having a list of classifications for our parks in our 2 wards.
Yeah, so I think that perhaps your governance team could work with us, because we actually do it. It's very easy for us to generate a list. It's open to anyone who works at council. So those garden heritage parks that I was talking about, those are parks like Woodham Gardens, or the Edmonds Factory Garden, Rising Home, those types of gardens that have that historic history. And that's very easy. We do have a slightly different level of service for those parks, with an internal service delivery team as well. So we can get that list for you. There in your ward, yours is a bit unusual, where it doesn't actually have any of those parks. Yeah, surprise, surprise. Yeah, there are no technically any garden and heritage classified parks in this 2 ward areas. Yeah.
I think where I was heading was having the maintenance schedule or mowing schedule for those parks, because they're classified a certain way, would be really handy. And I reckon we could get our head around that then.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, any more questions for Robbie, because his time is finished?
You're being expelled now, Robbie.
Yeah, no worries.
You can stay on listen if you want, Robbie.
Yeah, all good. Hey, thanks for your time, guys.
Yeah,
as always,
thanks.
if there's any questions like that, we're always keen to connect with people and tell you about the places we look after. So yeah, hit us up.
Awesome. Thank you. Bridie, it's your turn.
Thank you. I'm going to make an assumption that the board has read the Community Parks Quarterly update. Have you got? Nope, looking me a bit funny. That's okay. All right, it might be coming.
Sorry, I'll just butt in there. Sorry, Bridie, it's Cindy.
You're up.
So that will be included in the board's area report for its 14th of March meeting. But the board did receive a copy via email back in January, beginning of February.
Cool. Sorry, I must have shot the down there a little too soon. Sorry about that. So in community parks, much like regional parks, we do have an internal service delivery team. We do all of our reactive maintenance through our internal delivery team, and we also do our garden and heritage maintenance through our internal delivery team. We also have a large portion of our work contracted out to recreational services. So I'm pretty sure you guys will be pretty familiar with seeing those guys around a lot of your parks. They do all of our bulk mowing, so all those big wide area mowing, all the sports field mowing. They do all our spraying, and they empty our bins for us as well. Everything else that isn't that big type of gardening work, we do internally. So that's pretty much the split and how it works with us. The schedule that you already mentioned, Linda, there is set every year. So at the beginning of every financial year, we look at basically our budget, what we've done in previous years, and then we go back and we forecast which activities that we need, the frequency we need to hit every month to make sure we deliver our levels of service. So that's kind of in a nutshell how it works for parks. It's planned a year in advance. It is a little bit of I wouldn't say it's a guessing game. We use as much sort of historic knowledge as we can to build those regimes. With climate change, things are getting a little bit more difficult from time to time to try and predict what's going to happen, and making sure that actually is what's happening out there going to align with what we've provisioned for in the contract in terms of maintenance. So that's probably one of our biggest hurdles that we have with parks in terms of the contract year to year. For the last sort of 5 or so years, I'd say it's been quite difficult. We do have some flexibility in our contract to provide more service from time to time, reactively, especially when we have seasons like right now, February. It's been, I think, the wettest February on record. Halfway through February, we had 3 times the amount of rain as we normally would. So it was just like a very long, prolonged spring. We're seeing mushrooms growing around the place in February, which is usually unheard of. So it's becoming a little bit harder to predict. Luckily for actually your board area, things are a little bit drier out there. You've got lighter soil. So it's actually a little bit easier for us to maintain during the height of summer compared to some of our wards around the city. We all have the same level of service. Quite often I see questions around from elected members sometimes, and a lot of the time in the community where, you know, comparing why does this area town get more service than this area town? We actually have a level of service that is basically, it's kind of like a one size fits all. Everyone gets the same level of activity taking place in their areas. One isn't favoured over the other. I will come back to those historic gardens that Celeste, you mentioned a little earlier. Those are the only gardens sites that we have a higher level of service on. And we do have some parks that are just really, you're right there, Councillor Major.
Yeah, no, I'm just
He's
charging
going
up.
to leave very shortly.
I'm just charging up the
Are there any
battery.
questions you want to ask before you leave?
Okay. Is there anything? Yeah,
Sorry.
shoot if you need to
Sorry,
ask me
Phil,
anything.
we'll leave shortly, Bridie. So are there any questions you want to ask before you leave?
Yeah.
Talking to Philip.
Oh, okay.
He can't
Philip.
hear me.
Are you mad at Philip? You're calling him Philip. He's not
Is
hearing.
there anything you want to
I
ask
can
before
hear.
you
Yeah,
go,
sorry,
Phil?
yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, what were you saying, Joe?
I said, is there anything you'd like to ask before you go?
Oh, no, I'm here for another 10 minutes. Yeah, don't worry. You're far away.
No? Okay. Sorry, Bridie.
Does anyone else have any other questions before I just get on to
Linda?
a new, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about a new ranges that we have coming on board, but is there any questions about maintenance or anything so far?
Yeah, me.
Linda?
Yeah, okay. And you've explained why the maintenance schedule in Preston's Park would be not hitting the button. It's a new area, and you're needing historic information to set the pattern of mowing and trimming. But we've got a lot of questions. Well, there's 4 questions here, all from Preston's Park, complaining about lack of mowing, trimming, flooding. So these guys are going to want to have answers, and I understand from your point of view you need the historic information, but it's a new area, so I'd really like to see it stepped up a bit here. Perhaps another mowing or trimming cycle put in here, because you know, we've got big landscape reserves here around our playgrounds that were planted with real plants are now growing real weeds, big weeds. There's no plants that died, which is really sad for people to look at.
Yeah, so I don't know if you realise, but I actually cut out completely and it kicked me out of the meeting for a second. So I'm going to answer the question as best as I can with what I heard. Sorry. Preston's Park. Yeah, so there was the spreadsheet that the governance team sent out to me last week, and I did see that about Preston's Park. So I have gone back to our advisor and asked him what's happened here, because that should all be in contract and that shouldn't actually be an issue. So sometimes when we have those developers creating new landscapes, it's handed over to council, and they need to capture all the information, all this technical stuff that happens come through to us, and we start maintaining it through the contract. It should be pretty seamless, but in this case, obviously, something's gone awry there, and there seems to be some confusion as to what the developer is supposed to be maintaining and what we are supposed to be maintaining. It does seem to me like Preston's Park, for a long time, north and south areas has been an issue. It's always been the case since I've started at council. I'm not sure why, but I'm getting an update from our advisor probably by Wednesday. I'd say it's by Wednesday about what's happened, so we can make sure that hopefully doesn't happen again. And we've asked Rec Services to go out and just maintain it anyway, even if it's not in contract, just to get it back into a reasonable level of service, so that when it comes into contract, it can just keep going and we can just keep steadily maintaining it. But yeah, you're right. I went down and took a look for myself after I saw that spreadsheet come through. And yeah, around some of those playgrounds, it looks like it's just been missed completely off a maintenance schedule.
Yes, you'll need a replanting program.
Yeah, we do have a green asset renewal budget that we're going to be doing a lot of planting this autumn and a lot of infill planting. So it's on our list to do around Preston's area.
And a clarification about who's doing what here. So recreational services, they're doing a little bit. I don't know where city care fits with that. I think they're in the water up to their knees, working furiously, but it doesn't happen often enough.
Yep. So the water guys, I don't know all their maintenance schedules. So when they do the clearing of the waterways, I think they do that a few times a year. Our guys will come and do all basically the flat park-like looking areas. They'll do all those. Then the roading guys will do all the median strips, basically, and berm areas.
And along boundary fences, that's another one.
Boundary fences, if it's on a park, and there's a shared boundary, then it's park's responsibility to do those if it's on a park.
So just something that's a little bit summary, like a summary of who's doing what would be great. That would be great.
Yep. They can be organised.
Okay, thanks, Bridie.
Bridie, there were a lot of questions coming through about the stage of QE2 Park. Did you want to?
Yeah, I had a look at that too. Yeah. So QE2 is a bit of a funny one because it's a community park because it's a sports park. However, there's a lot of areas that have been affected by the earthquake. So it was sort of left for a while. And now there's a lot of sort of community work happening in some areas. There's some areas that's maintained under facilities maintenance contract because there's a facility in the middle of it, and then some of it is parks. So we're trying to unknit some of it at the moment as well, because it appears that we have probably two contractors in there. Recreational Services doing all the big sports field mowing and spraying. And then we also have, it appears to have City Care doing some of the facilities maintenance. So at the moment, we're trying to find out exactly what it is that City Care are doing so that we can fill any gaps that are being missed. Over in the Ascot Golf Course, ex-Ascot Golf Course area, there's a revegetation plan and the master plan for that. I'm not sure when that's going to be initiated. I know that the red zone are potentially looking at doing something in there. That something is, I don't know. I have spoken to Rob Shelton, the team leader down there, about just getting an update as well. So we're going to have a big discussion about this week, about who's using that area and when it's going to start being regenerated, when the funding is going to come through so that that project can kick off.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit of like the feedback about like the mowing's really good, but when it comes to the garden, it seems like they're not doing it properly. Like they're just putting bark over the weeds and the weeds are growing through.
Yep.
I mean, the bark, it depends how they've done it. So the weed spray that we have, depending on the weed species. So like with us, the weed spray that we have is called Bio Weed Blast, and it's manufactured locally by Kiwi Care. So it's a fatty acid product, and it's plant derived. So because we don't spray any glyphosate or any sort of synthetic chemical really through our maintenance contract, we have to use the fatty acid form, and that basically, it doesn't translocate through the plant. So it doesn't move from the leaf down into the structure of the plant, killing it. It will burn it off, and you'll kill lots of easy to kill plants, but you need to keep applying it a lot to kill anything with a good root system or a big tap root on it. In the east, you guys do tend to have a lot of those plants that are difficult. They have the big tap-rooted plants because it's so dry, right? So that the plant's just going to grow and it's going to go down to reach some water. So it is difficult to manage in those areas. So the bark is there to help suppress. It's never going to kill them. It's there to help the spraying, because we don't like to dump out a whole heap of spray as well. So we want to spray it before the mulch goes on. Might not kill it all, but it's going to slow it. So it comes to a level it's going to be easier to maintain. Depending on what instruction the contractor was given, sometimes they're told to remove everything by hand prior, which is obviously best practice. That's best horticultural practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's generally how we would do it. I spoke to Rec Services last week about that, and I'm not sure who did that. So I'm doing a little bit of digging why they would spray without at least removing any sort of more hard to kill noxious weeds. We would usually incorporate that into our scope of works before they'd start doing any of that work.
They're pretty big weeds that they put the bark over. Any other questions before Bridie goes? Because your time's nearly up. We've got to move on. Is there anything else you want to tell us, Bridie?
No, we do have, just so you're aware, we do have a new community partnership ranger starting in our team on the 21st of March. Her name is Annalise, and Annalise, when you have maybe your next meeting, I'll just get her to come along virtually, or maybe when we can meet again in person, just to introduce her to you. Her role is going to be sort of helping new groups or established groups, basically the conduit between council and them, and helping them form and helping them to become sustainable and activated in our parks.
Wonderful, thank you.
Cool.
Awesome, thanks, Bridie.
Great, no problem, thank you.
Okay, see you later.
Cheers.
Rightio, so we're going to move on to Emma Hunter. Is Emma here? Sustainable Coastlines.
Emma's online now,
yes,
Jo.
hi Emma.
Kia ora koutou.
Welcome along.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
Jo.
you.
I'm the chair today. And we've
Nice to
got
meet you, Jo.
our councillors Celeste and Phil and our other board member Linda.
Nice
and
to meet
some
you
stuff.
all.
Thank you. So you're going to tell us about what you've been doing?
Yep, definitely. Am I okay to share my screen? I've got a bit of a PowerPoint
Sure are.
presentation.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank
I'll
you.
just get that up and running. Everyone can see that okay?
Yes.
Brilliant. Tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi tēnā ki ngā tangata whenua o te rohi, no Scotland aho, ko Hunter te whanau, ko Emma aho, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for having me to speak today. It's a real privilege to be able to share the research that I have been working on, particularly to do with pre-production pellet pollution, which I know all too well, unfortunately. My name is Emma Hunter. I am a recent graduate from Edinburgh Napier University, which is from my home country of Scotland. I've been based in Otatahi for the past 2 years, and I did my master's degree by distance learning. So wherever I landed in the world was where I could do my research project. So I did base it here in Otatahi, Christchurch. So that's one part of what I'm here to talk to you about today is the findings of my research project. So I do come here with two hats today. The first one being that of a recent master's graduate. And then the second one is to do with my new role with sustainable coastlines, which I just started back in January, which it is all interconnected. And I will be explaining a little bit more about sustainable coastlines towards the end of the presentation. But today it is about the perils of pre-production pellet pollution. And this was the basis of my study. So the title of my study, it's now a published piece of research. It is freely available open access in the journal called Microplastics. So anyone can access this piece of research after today's presentation. And feel free to contact any queries you have about this piece of research to direct that towards my personal email, which is emmacaitlinhunter@gmail.com. And my research project was the quantification and characterization of pre-production pellet pollution in the Avon Heathcote Estuary, Te Hutai, Aotearoa, New Zealand. So a little bit of a mouthful, but I will be breaking down the different components of that research project. And just to mention, I didn't do it alone. I did have co-authors, Raquel Devine, Olga Pantos, Phil Clunies-Ross, Fraser Doak, Hayden Masterton, and my supervisor from Scotland, Robert A. Briers. So I'm sure I'm talking to people who are already well invested in coastal ecosystems, but I thought I would touch upon why I chose the Avon Heathcote Estuary, Te Hutai, as my study system for my master's research. For a number of reasons, but firstly, I was studying wildlife biology and conservation, so immediately the biology of this ecosystem captured my attention. It is a key wildlife habitat. It can support over 30,000 birds at peak times of year. It's a key place in the East Asian Australasian flyway, so it's a key place for migratory birds. You probably are all familiar with the godwits coming here every year. And it supports a number of species that are internationally important. So as a wildlife conservationist, the estuary really captured my attention for that reason. Of course, it has a rich history with the connection to humans. It's been an area for settlement for over 600 plus years, starting with Maori settlement all through to the arrival of the Europeans. And on that note, it has a strong link with culture, Mahinga Kai, which unfortunately is being threatened. The ability to harvest Mahinga Kai from the estuary is at risk with the level of pollution that the estuary faces. So that does hinge on that as well. And also the estuarine system is at the interface of what happens on the land and what happens in the ocean. It does sit in the middle, and it's a really crucial habitat for that, which really relates nicely to Kaiuta Kai Tai, from mountains to sea. The estuary is affected by what happens on the land and then does feed that into the ocean. So it is a really important ecosystem to look at, particularly with the anthropogenic effects we're having on that ecosystem. And also recreation. On a day like today, if you go down to the estuary, you probably will see people windsurfing or sailing, walking around it. It really is an ecosystem or an environment that people get a lot out of as well, in addition to the wildlife. So that's really why I decided to focus on the estuary for my research project. But unfortunately, with most of our natural environments today, they are under threat. And one of the threats that is facing a lot of the world is plastic pollution. So before I go specifically into the pre-production pellet that I focused on, just winding the scope out to focus on plastic pollution as a whole. And why is it a problem? Plastic is a brilliant material. I'm presenting to you today from a laptop that's most of its components are plastic. We drive cars that have plastic components. our modern world does rely on it, and it can be brilliant. But unfortunately, we haven't really worked out what we do with it once we're finished with it. And also sometimes just using it once and then throwing it away. We've really come unstuck because we got super excited about a material without thinking of the end results of that material. It's ending up in the environment. Wildlife is ingesting it. It's been documented to be ingested by a range of species, from, you know, turtles to smaller animals, and also humans. It does have large social impacts to the people who are affected by plastic the most. So we really do need to think about more why we're using plastic, when we're using plastic, and what we do with it once we're finished with it. And just now diving a little bit deeper into other types of plastics, the pellets I focused on are microplastics. And just a quick rundown of what microplastics are. They are pieces of plastic that measure less than 5 mil in size. And these are even more difficult than your average large plastic bottle for wildlife to detect, and they're easier to mistake for natural prey. They can be ingesting them without them even knowing. Most of these microplastics, are a large majority, are invisible to the naked eye. We are actually breathing in microplastics as we speak. The particles can be that small. And releasing it back to humans, they reckon over the course of a year, every human ingests about a credit card sized amount of plastic, simply from the air we breathe and the food we eat. So these tiny microplastics, less than 5 mil in size, are everywhere, and we can't even see them. There's two types of microplastics. The first are primary microplastics. So these are plastic particles that have been intentionally created to be that small size. So that was your microbeads in your toothpaste and your body scrubs, which are now banned, which is a great start. And they're also the pre-production pellets that I'll be talking about. They've been intentionally created to be that small size. And then you have secondary microplastics, which are impacted by the sun, waves, and winds. So that is your bottle, your juice bottle, getting broken up by the sun, wind, and waves and broken down into those small 5 mil, less than 5 mil pieces. And therefore, they're now microplastics. But in my research, I did focus on a very specific type of microplastics, a primary microplastic called pre-production plastic pellets. And this is the life cycle of those pellets. They start out as all plastics. They're from the fossil fuel oil industry. And the product from that gets converted into the plastic material, made into these little plastic pellets. And then those little pellets are shipped off to the plastic manufacturer, and they act as the feedstock of all plastic items made. You start out with these little pre-production pellets that get bought by manufacturers, melted down, then molded into the product that manufacturer then sells. And then this life cycle, I do notice there is a flaw in this, because this is not a closed loop. Not all plastic products are getting recycled, not even the majority. And this is a bit idealistic, but then that plastic product can be recycled. Some people or some manufacturers or industry sites do take plastic back, and they do then chip up that plastic and remelt them into the feedstock, which is then resold. So that can happen, but unfortunately, plastic products often just end up in the bin, in the environment, and that recycling loop doesn't happen. But that is a rundown into what a pre-production pellet is. It is the feedstock to all plastic products that are created. So I focused on that type of pollution, and then I wanted to see whether they were actually in the estuary. So I did a little bit of research to see what the extent of the plastics industry in Otatahi, Christchurch was like. I didn't really know how many businesses were involved in the plastics industry here. So I did a little bit of research, and I mapped the organizations that are involved in the plastics industry. So Some of these are plastic manufacturers, some of them are recyclers, some of those supply those feedstock, the items, those pellets. So this is just the industry as a whole. And then what I did was I put in the waterways. So I put in the Otakaro Avon River in red there. I put in the Opuahu Heathcote and highlighted the estuary just to see where the industry sat around these essential waterways. And I realized they were pretty close, and that potentially these rivers, if they were affected by this pollution, could then be transporting that into the estuary. So as a scientist, you shouldn't go into research with any preconceived ideas of your results. But after mapping this, I was fairly confident that I would find these pre-production pellets in the estuary. And it kind of brings the question, why? Why did I choose pre-production pellets? I've been looking at the plastic pollution problem, and it seems so overwhelming, and it's hard to know what you can do about it. You see a plastic bottle as you're walking down the street. It's very hard to trace that item back to where it came from. You can blame the company that produced it, but it's hard to allocate responsibility for that pollution being in the environment. When I looked at pre-production pellets, it seemed really simple. These are owned by the plastics industry. They are their feedstock to make products. They're owned by them, so they shouldn't be in the environment. And also, we can allocate ownership to this type of pollution. And being able to allocate ownership means that you know where you can have an impact. You can kind of channel your efforts more streamlined to that source where you think the pollution is coming from. And ultimately, I have a big hope that this research and the evidence that it produces, and it says there that the pollution is there, can be used to protect environments as special and as important as the Avon Heathcote Hutai estuary. So how did I start off my research? I started it off with a very big walk around the estuary, and this was what was termed a rapid estuary assessment. So really, it was just to see whether these pre-production pellets were there. And if they were there, were they accumulating in spots of the estuary more than others? So you can see from this map here, blue is a low amount of pellets that were visible. Orange is a medium amount, so 10 to 20 pellets visible, and red is high, so that's over the 20 pellets were visible, and that is just on the surface in what was a 25 by 25 centimeter quadrat. So this was really just to, one, see if the pellets were present in the estuary, and two, to see where they were mostly accumulating. And this was my view. So as I was walking around the estuary, this is what I was looking for down at my feet. So in the leaf litter, highlighted in the red circles, are these pre-production pellets. Some of them are harder to see than others, but once you see them, you can't unsee them. So this is what I was looking for. So very small, less than 5 mil in size, because they're microplastics. And these are what was sitting in the estuary banks. So using that assessment, just being one person doing this research, I couldn't unfortunately take samples all the way around the estuary. I boiled it down to 7 accumulation hotspots from the data from the brief walk around. So we've got Fairmead Bridge, Humphreys Drive and Sandy Point in that southwest location. Up in the east, or up to the north and east, we have Bridge Street and South New Brighton Park. And then in the southeast, Penguin Street and South Shore Spits. So I also grouped them by downwind location to see if the wind direction actually affected where these pellets ended up in the environment. So what I did when I got to each of these 7 sites is I put down a 50-meter transect, and then I had the quadrat again, the 25 by 25 centimeter quadrat. I popped that down at 10-meter intervals at each site, I dug to 5 centimetres deep, and this is in the estuary bank. I collected that sample and I did put it in a Ziploc bag. So there was a good use for plastic on that occasion, but the plastics that I found inside it wasn't as good. But 5 samples were taken at each of the 7 sites. And being a distance learner, I didn't have an affiliation with a university, so I actually did the analysis at home. So I looked at the number of plastic pellets in each sample, the size of these pellets, and measured them with a ruler. I looked at shape, the colour of these pellets, also how weathered they were to try and infer how long they'd been retained in the estuary for. And also I looked at their polymer type. So what type of plastic were they made out of? And the number is important to see how many are accumulating, but the characteristics I wanted to measure to see if I could infer more about those pellets and be able to trace them back to their source more easily. If I knew one type of pellet was the most predominant, perhaps I could trace that back to the source. So this was what I found. So across those 35 samples, those 7 sites, 5 samples from each, I found 3,819 pellets. So pretty substantial for a one-person study. That is by no means all the pellets were out there. That's just a brief scratching the surface snapshot of what is actually out there. Comparing between sites, next to the inlet of the Heathcote River, the Opoaho Fairmead Bridge site, compared to the Otakaro Avon River entrance by Bridge Street did have a higher accumulation of pellets. There was also high variance between sites, between the samples at each site. They weren't consistent, so these pellets are not accumulating very consistently even within the site. There was a strong downwind accumulation. So if you look at Humphreys Drive and Sandy Point, there was a northeasterly blowing in the 2 days of sampling and before that. So that could have caused the accumulation in those areas. And also looking at the proximity to the river outlets, stormwater pipes and drains, this could be where these pellets are coming from. And that does ask the question, how did they get there? So drains is one point of where they could get there. The drains do go straight into the river. If they do go into the stormwater drain, that is a method of transport for these pellets to get into the estuary. How do they get to the drain? Mishandling and transport can be as simple as that. These pellets are shipped around in containers, sometimes just bags, as you can see. They may get punctured by forklifts or just mishandling. These can be dropped on the road. They then blow into stormwater drains and end up in the environment. Also at sea, they can be mismanaged there and end up in the ocean from that point of view too. And where they ultimately end up can also be dictated by the elements, the currents, getting weathered by the sun, the wind, that can also dictate where they accumulate. So it is hard to work out exactly why they accumulated where they did. We can best guess and use reasoning on some of them, but also the elements are at play as well. So there's not always a direct correlation with where these pellets are found and where they first entered the estuary. The overall characteristics that I found of these pellets, the majority were clear, of an average size, 3 mil, cylindrical, averagely weathered, so have been in the system for some time, and mostly made up of polyethylene. So using those characteristics, I thought I would be able to infer where they would have come from. But inland in Christchurch, Otatahi, there's probably about 10 plastic manufacturers that might possibly use these type of pellets. So I didn't manage to narrow it down directly, but it does kind of give you some understanding of where these pellets may have been used or will have been destined to be used.
Just 5 minutes to go. Emma.
Sure, thank you. So the most common type would have been used for plastic packaging, carrier bags, wraps. That's the type of plastic these pellets would have been destined for. So what we can do is try and enforce best management practices with the plastics industry and trying to adopt a process that minimizes pellet loss at source. And there is a program called Operation Clean Sweep that the industry can sign up to achieve that. Using less plastic in general, therefore there's less plastic pellets in the world that are destined to be made into products. Trying to put filters on drains to stop these pellets going down them and into the estuary. And also coming like today to talk about the problem and raise awareness of it. And I just want to thank these organisations and not-for-profits, charities, and people who have helped with my research along the way. I couldn't have done it without them. And just quickly, that has now led on to my new role with Sustainable Coastlines. I'm now the programme coordinator for Otatahi Christchurch, so it fits in quite well. And Sustainable Coastlines are a registered charity that are focused on restoring the Māori of our moana, and doing that by connecting people with nature so that they can be inspired to make change and supporting communities on ways that they can do that. You may have heard of Sustainable Coastlines before, most notably known for their big cleanup events, but they also do riparian planting, education workshops with schools and teachers, raising public awareness in media campaigns, and involving communities and citizen scientists and citizen science so that they can get involved in environmental monitoring. And we do have an event coming up in New Brighton towards the end of the month, 26th of March. So pencil it in your calendars if you're free, with a range of other collaborators. Fingers crossed with the COVID situation, it is ever evolving, but we're hopeful to run a cleanup event in that Saturday in March. So thank you very much for having me to speak today. Hopefully I kept till time, and I really appreciate this opportunity to speak.
We've still got 3 minutes to go, so does anyone have any questions?
Yep.
Yes, Linda.
Sorry, I can't see Linda.
I'm just going to raise another potential reason for this. And when I was living in Waimak, I saw a lot of this. The building industry receive pallets that have got strapping, plastic wrap, and heaps of polystyrene. That I saw going into the waterways. And I haven't really seen, I'm in a new area here, and we have lakes that they're our retention waterways, water management processes out into the Avon River. I haven't seen so much of it here, but then I don't feel like I'm being a watchdog here. It's down the road. But I saw it happening, and I thought it was horrific that polystyrene was just blowing away in the wind, and naturally it goes into the waterways. So there's another reason that we could have this stuff out there.
Thanks, Linda. Any other questions? Sorry, I can't see anyone because the screen share is still up. Well, thank you very much, Emma. That was really awesome.
Thanks for having me.
There's quite a lot of those all over the beach as well. Now I know.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah, if the board members can still please stay online, and we'll finish the actual public briefing now. Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you, ka kite.
Yeah, thank you.